just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. This is the 18th of May, 2018. Friday Jobber, our magazine program we present every Friday morning, is now coming to you from WBRN Radio and over the Boston Red Network and various other outlets, including iHeart, Stitcher, Spreaker, and many, many others. I believe we're still on the Apple platform, although we don't do very much on the Apple platform. We're on Android. That is Google Play. That app will get you to us. Also, you can find us on Twitter under Boston Red, and on the Facebook platform for discussion. They have various issues that we post from time to time. Nonetheless, let's get on with it. We had a gentleman that was discriminated against, a very crass type of discrimination by Burger King in Boston. He was denied the right literally to eat a sandwich. The clerk there called the police and claimed that he was using a counterfeit money. They took him in, and he was in jail for a number of months. And later on in the scheme of things, the Secret Service determined that the money he used was not a counterfeit. He's still not gotten his money back. We'll go to that story in a minute here. And of course, we have the people from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, Virginia, Larry Sabato's shop, in the city in which Heber Heyer was killed by white supremacists. We'll first go to Hawaii and the Big Island and Kailua, and the problem now caused by sulfur dioxide on Paluna. Let's get that broadcast in. This is from Hawaii now.
To get one, Lynn? shone long and steady lines all afternoon. As Mileka Lincoln said, many more of those explosions at the summit of Kilauea are expected, and therefore more of these ash plumes. Today, the county handed out masks to those communities most at risk of seeing ash fall.
There's another line over here.
Thousands lined up to get N95 masks, which help filter out ash.
Oh, so grateful, so grateful. This is just like amazing that they're doing this.
A total of 18,000 masks donated by 3M were handed out at 4 locations. The explosion at Kilauea Thursday morning sent an ash plume that hovered mostly above the volcano and mountain view areas. It forced leaders at charter school Navai Ola to cancel classes.
The big factor in closing school today it wasn't just the explosion, it was the direction that this cloud of ash was headed in. And at one point this morning it was covering this entire area.
Rain kept the ash from sticking around, and the lack of winds kept it from spreading. But that also made the hazardous sulfur dioxide levels spike. Pahoa schools closed because of the increased SO2. Health officials also installed new monitors to track the air quality. Those monitors are put up in various locations. There are 10 of them installed today, from Kea'au to Pahoa to Lower Puna. Reporting live, I'm Lynn Kawano, Hawaii News Now.
All right, thank you much, Lynn. And those school closures that Lynn was talking about include Pahoa High and Intermediate, Pahoa Elementary, and Keonepoko Elementary School. 4 other charter schools canceled classes today as well because of the volcanic conditions, and those include the Hawaii Academy of Arts and Sciences and the Volcano School of Arts and Sciences.
The U.S.
All right, it's 7:48. Scott Rowland joins us now by phone. He is a specialist in volcanology and geochemistry. Scott, after what happened this morning, what are your main concerns?
Well, I think the eruption happened at 4:15, as I understand, and probably ash has fallen or is falling in the vicinity of where the explosion took place. I guess it doesn't sound as if the ashfall is super heavy, so I'm mostly worried that people are going to get all really, really upset and worried.
Yeah, and we are continuing to monitor the effects of the ash. When we see something like this, and we know that this is not the big one, is it possible that this is taking some of the pressure out, though? This is kind of a release, and maybe the big one won't be the magnitude that we might be expecting?
Well, I think it's probably not. I don't think there is a big one that's coming. I think it's going to be a series of explosions similar to the one that happened this morning. And that's based on what happened in 1924, which is really our only analog. So I think if this explosion really did make it to 30,000 feet, that is as big as those explosions were in 1924. But there's going to be more than one of them, probably.
Yeah. Scott, and we keep comparing it to 1924, but that was a long time ago, Scott. I mean, how reliable is that data, and how well preserved was it? I mean, how much can we trust that?
Oh, well, I think we can definitely trust the photographs that were taken at the time, and it's from those photographs that the height of the plume was measured. The observatory existed at the time, so they made measurements of various aspects of those explosions. So I think the data are pretty good.
Yeah. You know, Mileka was standing right outside of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, and she mentioned something really interesting, that there was this big explosive event. I mean, not the big one that we were expecting, but and yet she's right there and she didn't hear anything. Is that unusual?
I don't think so. The actual explosions are taking place way down inside Halemaumau, 300, 400 meters below the rim of the crater. And so the sound and the energy gets directed almost only vertically upwards. And so I guess I'm not surprised that there isn't a loud bang that people hear.
Yeah, which I think a lot of us were expecting. But Scott, now, as you look at what could potentially happen, you said that maybe we're not going to see a big one, but we're going to see a series kind of similar to what we saw this morning. Is there any way that we could prognosticate how many of these we might see?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is no. Certainly, again, basing our experience on 1924, those explosions were episodic for about 2.5 weeks, I believe.
All right, well,
and that's not a guarantee that it'll be 2.5 weeks this time, certainly.
Yeah. All right, well, we will keep our eyes on that. And Scott, thank you for your expertise this morning. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right, 7:51 right now. Here's Dan Cook.
Yeah, let's take a look outside here on Oahu. We've got some clouds, showers, a few on the windward side. We're not seeing. Okay, we have a press release the EOC is having on the Big Island in Hilo. Let's go there.
Put a cloud up to 30,000 feet above sea level. This cloud was short-lived, though. It went up high, but because the duration of the event was pretty short, it was high, but not a really big cloud. Based on our models and some reports that we got, ashfall was pretty localized to Volcano Village area and Volcano National Park, trace amounts of ash in that area. So a big event that got people's attention, but not with widespread impacts. And this is the kind of event that we had been expecting might happen at Halemaumau based on interaction of the dropping lava levels with groundwater. So this explosive event is consistent with what we were thinking might happen. And so right now up at Halemaumau, we're still getting ash emissions at a lower level, kind of 12,000 feet above sea level, so a few thousand feet above the crater floor. So we're still watching things real closely. We may have additional larger events, more powerful events, kind of like what we saw earlier this morning.
You said that you were expecting something like this. You used the words "the big one" before. Was this the big one?
Well, I never used those words.
Somebody did.
I know that word is out there. In my mind, what we saw today, this cloud up to 30,000 feet above sea level, that's consistent with what we were expecting. And so, we could expect similar events to happen in the future as these kind of interactions between the groundwater and the lava continue.
So this is compared to the Tuesday event, would you say?
Yeah, so what day is it today?
The one where the big cloud was going up.
Yeah. So similar type of activity. That one put up a cloud that was not nearly as high and was more of a sustained ash emission event that lasted a little bit longer. So, the volcano, it's a real dynamic situation up there. We could have additional events like this morning that punch up and then die back down really quickly. We could have some more sustained ash coming out of Halemaumau. The one this morning was definitely the biggest we've seen so far, just in terms of energy and how high up into the atmosphere it got.
This is clearly an interaction with groundwater.
I don't want to say clearly. This is, based on our best evaluation of the situation, but it's really consistent with that. So.
Can you speak about the ground cracks on Highway 11 and what you guys are seeing up near the summit in that area and what that may mean?
Yeah, the most recent information I have about that is from yesterday, so I'm not aware of any additional reports of cracking on 11. Yesterday, there was a lot of seismic activity, as you know, real shallow, strong earthquakes that were felt by folks. Jim, do you know of any more overnight observations on the earthquake activity?
No. It appears to be isolated so far to the response to last night's earthquakes, shallow, magnitude 3+.
Michelle, you talked about how it could, if rocks keep falling and then you have that plug, the big one, as Don said. So is this release helpful to avoid that big one because it's relieving the stress or the pressure?
No, because the situation, as I said, is dynamic. So you can have, the event such as we saw this morning. It's a short-lived event. It might, it may have relieved pressure temporarily, but we expect that these kinds of, like I said, that, more groundwater may be getting into the system, and we expect that similar events could continue.
Over the last 24 hours, much of the focus has been on the summit. What's happening in Kilauea? What's the latest in the northeast?
I'm going to turn to Jim for that.
We just got a report from our field crew. Fissure 17 is still spattering. However, the lava flow has not advanced significantly. It is oozing at the front. There are very small pads of what looks like very pasty pahoehoe coming out. There is some mild activity at other events. A couple of fissures are still incandescent. Some booming sounds are occurring from other fissures other than 17. And copious amounts of gas are coming out, and they're all kind of sitting in that area due to weak winds. So there's a big gas SO2 issue now in the Lower East Rift Zone.
Hey, just one last one. Residents were saying that the plume looked smaller today than it did a couple of days ago. Is there any way to talk about volume of what's being generated from the source?
At this point, like I said, this morning's event was very energetic. It really went up high, but it was really short-lived. The explosion that caused that cloud today it only lasted a few minutes at most. And so the volume of material that came out today was actually pretty small. I can't give you any numbers, but you can just imagine if it's a short event, it's just going to have less time to put stuff up into the cloud. So tall but small.
Actually, most of the mass will probably come out very near the source of the explosion, and we don't have anybody in there yet because of the danger. So we can't really answer your question fully yet.
Are you still seeing deflation at the summit, and do you assume that magma is still pulling away from Kilauea at this time?
Yeah, it's still deflating, but quite slowly. This last explosion this morning and the one last night, there were smaller ones last night, significantly changed the geophysical picture at the summit, reduced seismic energy being expelled, and that seems to be consistent with the idea of a large gas explosion or some sort of explosion, releasing that pressure. It is starting to build up again, but very, very slowly. But I'll remind you that 1924 was a series of explosions. It wasn't just one big one. And so we're in it for the long haul, looking for what happens next.
Did you mention? I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you. Did you mention seismicity on the lower rift zone? Is that?
Seismicity on the Lower East Rift Zone was unaffected, but the seismicity at the summit was significantly affected. It was significantly reduced by an explosion last night. It built up very slowly before the explosion this morning at 4, and it dropped again. And so we're just watching it build up again. And it's actually too soon to tell how fast it's building up. It was only a few hours ago.
Nonetheless, that was a report from Hawaii Now. They were comparing the Kailua volcanic activity had been compared, I should say, to Mount St. Helens. I lived in Washington State at the time, so I can remember Mount St. Helens. That was 38 years ago. This particular eruption is about 30,000 feet, I think. Mount St. Helens was 80,000 feet. Here, 20,000 feet. So it's not that. And they are comparing it also to 1924. Now, obviously, 1924 did not have the technology that they had today, but they did have photographs, and they did have an observatory there. We'll continue to follow this story out of Hawaii and the Big Island as separate from Honolulu, which is one of the smaller islands there, and the way that the state is configured. We'll have more on that. I was talking to a native Hawaiian, and I had forgotten my geography, unfortunately, from when I was in elementary school, but we did at that time were appraised of the Big Island as opposed to the one that was most popular with with the American public, because Hawaii had become recently a state. In fact, it maybe wasn't quite a state at that time. I'd have to look and see. I think it was 1959 or something that it came into the state. Hawaii and Alaska were the last states, they were territories prior to that. Anyway, nonetheless, we'll leave Hawaii and the geologists at Kululua and Paluma and the gas mask to deal with the fallout from that on the island. And we'll go to a Boston story here, Sedgway. What happened to a homeless man in Boston? This was in Emory Ellis. He was homeless at the time. He was hungry, so he decided in the morning in 2015, that but instead of having breakfast, he got a ride to a police station and more than 3 months in jail after he was wrongfully accused of using counterfeit cash. I remember once being questioned by some clerk. I had just recently, a minute or two before that, got some bills from a cash machine, and these just happened to be actually brand new $20 bills. And I then bought something with one of the bills, and the guy was scrutinizing the bills. I said, "Look, this came your cash machine, and in fact, these are brand new bills." He said, "Well, yeah, but people were coming in with counterfeit bills." And so I complained to the district manager of it was a CVS pharmacy, now that I think of it there. But anyway, it tells you how things can go. Mr. Ellis is suing the Giant. This is Burger King and the franchise for $1 million. His attorney said the cashier likely wouldn't have questioned if the money was real if he had been a European in a suit handing her the same bill. Even if he did, the cashier probably would have apologized and said she couldn't accept cash instead of calling the police. That's Justin Dorcher. He is the attorney here. A person like me wouldn't have gotten an apology, but a person would have, gotten an apology. But like Emory, however, found his way in handcuffs for trying to pay for breakfast with real money. The Burger King Corporation said they don't tolerate discrimination. We've heard that before, but couldn't comment, obviously, on the lawsuit. Two Guys Food, Inc., the franchise didn't immediately return the calls, no doubt. So, nonetheless, Ellis's lawsuit, which is reported by the digital legal service Law 360, heard of them? It was filed in Suffolk Superior Court there in Boston, seeking $995. And it's when two African Americans in Philadelphia at a Starbucks. These types of things are multiplying, this crass discrimination. I remember we covered a story out of the very red state of Oklahoma in which a barbecue establishment there that did not serve African Americans out in a place called Enid, Oklahoma. And evidently the only thing the State Human Rights Commission could say there in Oklahoma, they couldn't act unless there was a complaint, which seemed to me to be a bit dodgy and crafty. But these kind of things have come along. We label them side issues, and they're coming out in the age of DJ Trump. More and more people are putting their stories into a mass media or on social networks and in the courts, and you're going to see more and more of this coming in the coming months after what happened in Philadelphia, the situation there in Boston that was 3 years old, and various other things. The situation at Yale University, there was also an attorney that exploded in New York about some Latinos speaking Espanol. And a bar complaint has been filed against him. He lost his lease at the place where his Lord Precious was. And there are definitely consequences to these kinds of things. Now, at Yale, there was the student involved that was in her 40s, working on a PhD, I believe, in philosophy. But she also had a New York bar license. And the appropriate solution there would be a complaint with the New York State Bar against her. Let's go to Larry Sabato's shop, and we'll look at the complexion here. This is by Kyle Klondike. He's the managing editor there, writing on the 17th of May. And the key points here, the piece revisits a proposed path for Democrat majority in the House, which sketched out earlier in February. Overall, the Democrats' odds in the district mentioned have largely but not universally gotten a little better. The California primary, that is on June 5th, looms as the most important date in the battle for the House between now and the November elections. The Democrats' odds of retaking the House remain at 50-50, and one that they moved was in Nebraska. We talked about that with Ms. Eastman there. Kara Eastman upset a representative named Brad Ashcroft, who the Democratic Congressional Committee supported. That is Nebraska 2. On a primary night, she is a progressive person, and they have moved this from a toss-up to a leans Republican. Interesting phenomena there. There's been no polling as far as we're aware of in that particular district. And they go on to say some of the overall indicators are a bit better for Republicans, according to Real Clear Politics. The Democrats lead in the House on a generic ballot. Voters' preferences in their local House districts is about 5, down from 7 in February. Our take has always been on a generic ballot in February. It was too early. As we move closer and closer to the November election, the generic ballot will tighten up unless there are dramatic events coming. One event that could sway the entire setup is the price of petroleum. It's edging towards 80, I think it is, up to $80 a barrel. We'll have more of that on Numbers Man. That's our macroeconomics program on the weekend, in which we're coming into right now. But according to our models, dramatic occurrence will not appear until such time as petrol or crude oil goes to $100 a barrel. We are not saying that at 85 or 90 we'll start seeing some pressure. Yes, we will. But to dramatically change things and perhaps cause the tip of recessionary pressures, what we're talking about there. And in the article is from Reuters. They were talking about some of the retailers, such as Walmart, starting to feel some pressure, Dollar General, etc. That is the lower ebb of retailing. But will the Amazons of the world start to feel the pressure? Not yet. That's why our model is set at roughly $100 a barrel. But even at $85, $90 a barrel, the Walmarts of the world will feel it. And if they feel it, that means a lot of other retailers will be caught in the mix depending on their clientele. Anyway, that's kind of off a little bit there, but we had to go into it. A lot of information here from Pennsylvania. If you remember Connor Lamb winning in Pennsylvania 18. Lamb's victory technically reduced the Democrats' need to net gain from 24 to 23. We're not really that interested in 23 or 24. We're interested in 26 is where we're setting it. So he decided to run in the new PA 17. That is against Keith Ruffus, is a Republican there. We'll get into more of that in the Pennsylvania section. And let's see. Republican pickups, Democrats district. Let's just go down to these districts. It won't go as that much into explanation, but to the graphs of themselves. And this is some of the toss-ups here. Out in California, California 10, there's Denham, Knight in 25, Rufenbacher in 48, Royce is open, Kaufman in Colorado 6. These are toss-ups. Cabello in Florida 26, Bloom in Iowa 1. I'm a little skeptical of that one because he has been in that situation before. Jenkins in an open one in Kansas 2. There's also one in Michigan, used to be Trout 11, Lewis in Minnesota 2, Paulson in Minnesota 3, Pittenger in North Carolina 9. We won't get into all of these, but Brian Fitzpatrick in a PA 1. Some more PA ones here. Hurd, I think it's Hurd in it. That's open. Dent, open in PA 7. Hurd's in actually Texas. Comstock, that's Barbara Comstock. She's in Virginia 10. And Rachel in Washington 8. That's open. And also Washington, Wisconsin. Ryan. They've even toss up for Paulie Ryan's district. He is leaving. And leans Republican Minnie Waters. Karen Handel, that's Georgia 6. And of course, David Young, that was Iowa 3. Andy Barr, that's Kentucky 6. These are the ones that lean Republican. Won't go into all of them. This is Nebraska 2. That is Don Beacon. And let's see. Mira Love, she's out in Utah 4. David Bratt, he's in Virginia 7. And C.M. Rogers, that's Washington 5, that lean Republican. Likely Republican will go for a few of these. Nunez, that's in California 22. He's been leaving the fight for DJ Trump in the House. Buchanan, that is in Florida 16. Diaz Ballard, that's in Florida 25. These are likely Republican, incidentally. Rodney Davis, Illinois 13. I don't know very much about Illinois 13. Jack Bergman, that is in Michigan 1. Fred Upton, he's been around a long time. That's Michigan 6. And Wagner, that's Missouri 2. MacArthur, that is in Jersey 3. Not sure about Jersey 3. And whom else here? Norman, that's in South Carolina. There's another character named Tom Garrett. He's in Virginia 5. Groffman, that's Wisconsin 6. And there's some that are open. And some toss-ups here, Minnesota 1 and Minnesota 8. That was Mr. Nolan's old district, and Mr. Waltz. That he's running for governor. And like a Democrat, he's in the McSallies, that's in Arizona 2, California 14, that's old Darrell Issa, who is retiring. Ross Laitman is opened in Florida 27. And let's see here, Sheila Porter, that's New Hampshire 2. Lobano, that's in New Jersey 2, that's open. And Rosen in Nevada 3 is an open district. Likely Democrat. Peterson, Minnesota 7. Murphy, Florida 7. Charlie Tuna Chris, Florida 13. Amory Barra, that is California 7. T. O'Halloran, that is in the Democrats, Arizona 1. And M. Cartwright in Pennsylvania 8. So those are some that are open here. We get to the conclusion. One thing that's clear in comparing Democrats' current path to the House majority versus the the crystal ball sketched out in February is that the playing field is bigger. Back in February, we listed 65 GOP House seats in a competitive category. Now we list 86. Many of these are races likely will not develop, particularly in likely Republican columns, where we list 35 districts. On the other hand, some of the current safe Republican races may enter into the fray too. So that said, the drive for 25, we call it the drive for 26, essentially assumes a close battle for the House and tied to assess the most competitive and try to assess the most competitive GOPL seats. From that standpoint, there are some subtle movement towards the Democrats, but not enough to significantly alter it. Again, this rests on the economy more so than on foreign policy, because if you've been looking at various things, DJ Trump's highest rating has been on the economy. Now, we've looked at some polling from various places as far as the tax cuts. We had one out of Minnesota that was split about 42-42 with some manufacturing businesses. Some would benefit and some had not seen any benefit to date. So that is a very interesting situation. Also, the amount of jobs being created, you had 3.9%, and the Fed has forecast 3.8%. One of the consequences of historic low unemployment is that employers look at it as a time that the available job slots, available workers, are not favorable to them. Thus, they put off hiring because they know that a more competitive field, that salary compensation has to be raised. So they do not put those positions out there. They put them on the backboard. That is part of the negative consequences. So in some of these states of the last 3-5 months, less jobs have been created, particularly at the below the 50% mark. So those are some things we'll be looking at. Let us move on here. We've already covered Hawaii. And let's see, what else did we look at today? Oh, the CIA has its first woman director. It happens to be a torturer. Evidently, some Democrats went along with the deal. A very unfortunate situation. Out of the Congo, there's alarm grows. Ebola is back. Confirmed in a Congo city of 1.2 million across, and this was in 2014-2016. But it has returned, and we'll see where that goes. There's not been any movement as far as the Korean Peninsula. That summit is still on, but on a very, very shaky grounds. A scooter invasion evidently in Washington. We're not sure what that is. This was the Aaron Schollenberg. Was the attorney in New York. He was identified. He's the person that exploded and was going to file an ICE complaint against some Latinos for speaking Espanol. It went virtual, and many people, Borough President, Mr. Diaz, Ruben Diaz Jr., and Mr. Espanlot, Espaniot, Dano Espaniot, and I'm mispronouncing his name. They filed complaints with the New York Bar Association against Schulesberger. Anyway, this was evidently in Midtown Manhattan, and it was because the staff was speaking that. My guess is they are not documented. My next call is to ICE to have each of them kicked out of my country, he said. If they had the balls to come here and live off of my money, how are they going to live off his money if they are in fact working at the restaurant? I pay for their welfare. I pay for their ability to be here. They at least can speak English. Schulesberger said he's a lawyer with focus on commercial and insurance law, and noted that he speaks Spanish, some French, Mandarin Chinese, and Hebrew. In addition to English, his law office advertised that he can take calls in 4 languages. An irony that he's not listed on any, on commentators on social media. Mandarin Chinese is a very difficult language to learn. He does French, and of course he may be, I don't know if he's an Israeli citizen or not, but he does Hebrew. This guy should know better. When you're an attorney, you are telling your clients what you should say and how you should say it. No doubt, Diaz did not specify what part of the New York state court's rules of professional conduct, but no doubt it would come under that. They have something that they call basically fitness, which you could literally throw a ball through. More than, let's see. According to Yap, a listing for his office was flooded with thousands of 1-star reviews there, so it was, Corporate Suites, I guess that's where he's located, said that it had terminated an agreement to provide meeting space, mail handling, phone services to Schulesberger. Corporate Suites has a diverse and global community of business professionals working in a rich environment with mutual respect. That is from Mr. Grant here. Said in a statement, we found Schulenberger's statements offensive and contrary to our community norms. The video kicked off a mad dash in New York as reporters from the Daily News and Post, the tabloids, were trying to find Mr. Schulenberger, approached him in a courthouse in Queens. So they were chasing him down. He gave $500 to DJ Trump. They identified Schulesberger in a handful of other videos of heated political moments in New York, including the protest against Muslim activists last year. A rally held signs and icons connected to alt-right, the far-right movement associated with anti-Semitism, sexism, and racism. The ones that killed Heber Heyer in Charlottesville, Virginia. And this Milo Yiannopoulos, there's also had footage of those two. So Mr. Schulesberger has got some big problems there, no doubt about it. That is from our Times. Let me just check our time here. And our time is about up. Nonetheless, we'll see you on the week that was. That is where we recap the major events of the week. That'll be on WBRN and the Boston Red Networks on a Saturday morning. Also, we have the Monday Morning Quarterback on Monday morning, where we quarterback the latest news and the Sunday talk shows, if there are any events that are major. Some Sundays there are, and some Sundays there are not, and they're repeated in the news. Incidentally, over at Rasmus and the right-wing posters, there was a question there. should John McCain retire before he's going to die, according to them. And these right-wingers were in favor of him just quitting, literally. He won't quit. He will not die in office. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Let me just one quick look at, I don't think there are any polls out here this morning. We'll get that on the Weekman Was. This is Real Clear Politics. And the latest polls will probably be on Thursday. We have a Gravis poll here. I'm surprised about that. That is Indiana State Senate. Has Donnelly and Bratton basically tied is what it is. And a lot of these people with the Rasmussen reports out here, there was some Wednesday activities in Georgia, but it doesn't mean very much with Cade's there. And the Georgia governor Democratic primary, Abrams is way ahead there in Georgia. And what else do we have? Reuters had the generic ballot at Democrats won. Don't pay any attention to that. You can tell it's supposed to getting closer. Rasmussen had Democrats ahead by 6. Unbelievable there. And YouGov, that's the internet poll. Democrats up by 5, so between 5 and 1. That all averages out. And there's a Tuesday, there was a poll out of Missouri called the Missouri Scout. Has Claremont Castle ahead by 4. We'll look at more of this tomorrow night. This will do it for us. Good day.